Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. Below him, the massive space station orbited a purple planet covered in strange forests. This was the Galactic Defense Academy, and Jake could barely believe he was here. The other passengers on the ship looked nothing like him. There was Crix, who looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and shiny green skin. Next to Crix sat a blue-skinned girl named Vera, whose people came from the ice worlds. Behind them, a rock-like being called Torvin made scraping sounds when he moved. Jake touched the acceptance letter in his pocket. 3 months ago, he had been working on his family's cattle ranch in Montana. Now he was traveling to the most famous military academy in the galaxy. The letter said he had been chosen to try bonding with a war beast. War beasts were legendary creatures that looked like huge wolves mixed with dragons. They had thick scales instead of fur, and they were as smart as any person. For thousands of years, they had fought alongside different alien races, but they were very picky about who they would accept as a partner. Human. Crix clicked his mandibles together, which was how his people showed disgust. I still do not understand why your species was invited. You have barely learned to travel between stars. Jake said nothing. He had heard this kind of talk during the 3-day journey. Most of the other cadets thought humans were too new, too primitive, too weak. Maybe they were right. Jake had never even left Earth before this trip. The transport ship docked with the Academy station. Jake followed the other cadets through metal corridors filled with floating lights and humming machinery. Everything was clean and shiny and completely different from the dirt roads and wooden fences back home. Commander Veltar waited for them in the main hall. He was tall and covered in green scales with yellow eyes that never blinked. His species had been working with war beasts for over 2,000 years. Welcome, cadets, Commander Veltar said in a voice like grinding stones. You are here because your governments believe you might be worthy of bonding with a war beast. Most of you will fail. He led them through the academy, showing them training rooms, classrooms, and the living quarters where they would stay. Everything was built for beings much larger than humans. Jake had to climb onto chairs that were too high, and doorways stretched far above his head. The last stop was the beast quarters. Jake could smell them before he saw them. A wild animal scent that reminded him of the horses back home, but stronger. Much stronger. Currently, we have 47 war beasts looking for partners, Commander Veltar explained. Some have been waiting years. Others have rejected dozens of potential riders. They walked past huge enclosures where the war beasts rested. Jake saw creatures the size of small buildings, with scales that shifted color in the light. Their eyes tracked the group as they passed. Most of the cadets stayed in the center of the walkway, afraid to get too close to the barriers. Jake couldn't help himself. He moved closer to one enclosure where a young war beast was pacing back and forth. The creature noticed him and came to the barrier. Jake held perfectly still while golden eyes studied his face. That one bonded with a cadet last week, Commander Veltar said. Move along, human. At the end of the tour, they reached the largest enclosure. It stood empty except for a single war beast lying in the center. She was huge, even by war beast standards, with scales so dark they looked black. Scars covered her shoulders and sides. This is Zara, Commander Veltar said quietly. She is our oldest unbonded war beast. For 5 years, she has rejected every cadet who has tried to bond with her. We keep her here as a reminder of the old days when war beasts were more selective. Zara raised her massive head and looked at the group. Her golden eyes seemed ancient and sad. Several cadets stepped backward. Tomorrow you will have your bonding ceremony, Commander Veltar continued. Each of you will approach 3 different war beasts. If one accepts you, your training begins. If not, you will be sent home. That night, Jake lay in his bunk thinking about the war beasts. The other cadets talked about strategies and techniques they had learned. Crix practiced the formal approach his people used. Vera studied data files about war beast psychology. Jake thought about the horses on his ranch. His father had always told him that animals could sense your feelings. They knew if you were afraid, angry, or trying to trick them. The best way to approach any animal was with respect and honesty. The next morning, all the cadets gathered in the main training arena. One by one, they were called to approach the war beasts that had been selected for them. Jake watched as Crix walked up to a silver-scaled war beast using perfect military posture. The creature looked at him for a few seconds, then turned away. Vera tried next with a blue-scaled female. She offered the traditional greeting gifts that her people used. The war beast sniffed the gifts politely, then shook her head. One by one, the cadets tried and failed. A few succeeded. Jake watched a tall, gray-skinned alien bond with a young male warbeast. They touched foreheads, and Jake could see the moment when their minds connected. Finally, Commander Veltar called Jake's name. "Human Morrison, you will try with Zara," the other cadets whispered to each other. Everyone knew Zara never accepted anyone. This felt like a punishment, or maybe a joke. Jake walked across the arena to where Zara waited. She was even bigger up close, easily 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Her dark scales gleamed under the lights. Those ancient golden eyes watched his every step. Instead of walking right up to her like the others had done, Jake stopped about 10 feet away. He didn't bow or offer gifts or try to look impressive. He simply sat down cross-legged in the dirt and waited. The arena fell silent. Commander Veltar frowned. The other cadets stared. Zara tilted her huge head, studying this strange human who sat so still and quiet. Slowly, carefully, she rose to her feet. Step by step, she approached Jake. Her nostrils flared as she caught his scent. Jake didn't move. He kept his breathing steady and his hands relaxed, the same way he did when a nervous horse came to investigate him. He let Zara set the pace, make the choices. Zara circled him once, then twice. Finally, she settled down beside him, her massive head coming to rest near his shoulder. A sound like a deep purr rumbled in her chest. The arena erupted in shocked voices. Commander Veltar's yellow eyes went wide. Jake reached up slowly and placed his hand on Zara's warm scales. In that moment, he felt something he had never experienced before. Another mind touching his own, ancient and wise and incredibly strong. "Well," Commander Veltar said finally, "it seems we have our first successful bonding of the day." 3 days had passed since Jake bonded with Zara, and he still couldn't believe it was real. Every morning he woke up expecting to find out it had been a dream. But every morning Zara was there waiting for him in the training yard. Commander Veltar did not look happy about the bonding. During breakfast on the 4th day, he pulled Jake aside. "Human, I want you to understand something," the commander said, his yellow eyes cold. "Zara is old and set in her ways. Just because she accepted you does not mean you are truly bonded. Real partnerships take months to develop. Most fail." Jake nodded politely, but he knew the commander was wrong. When he was near Zara, he could feel her emotions like they were his own. When she was hungry, his stomach would growl. When she was content, he felt peaceful. It was stronger than anything he had ever experienced with the animals back home. The other cadets treated Jake differently now. Some, like Vera, seemed curious about how he had succeeded where others failed, but Crix and several others clearly resented him. "It was luck," Nolan Brady said during combat training. Nolan was another human, older than Jake and from one of Earth's military families. "Everyone knows Zara is half crazy. She probably just felt sorry for the farm boy." Jake ignored the comments and focused on learning. The academy training was unlike anything he had imagined. Riders and warbeasts had to work together in perfect harmony. Most pairs used neural interface headsets that let them share thoughts directly. Jake tried the technology, but it felt wrong. The artificial connection was cold and mechanical compared to the natural bond he shared with Zara. "You must use the interface," insisted Instructor Melox, a spider-like being with 8 arms. "How else will you communicate complex battle plans?" Jake tried to explain that he and Zara didn't need the interface, but Instructor Melox wouldn't listen. Every day, Jake was forced to wear the headset during training exercises. Every day, he and Zara performed worse than when they worked naturally. The other successful pairs were advancing quickly. Crix had bonded with a young male named Thunder, and they moved together like they had been partners for years. Vera and her war beast Frost specialized in ice attacks that could freeze enemies solid. Jake felt frustrated until Zara showed him something unexpected. During a flying exercise, she ignored the planned route completely and took him on a wild ride through the asteroid field surrounding the station. Jake held on tight as she dove and spun between the floating rocks. At first he was terrified. Then he realized that Zara was teaching him to trust her instincts. She could sense things he couldn't see: air currents, gravitational fields, the exact moment to turn or dive. When he stopped trying to control her and just became part of the flight, they moved together like one being. That evening, strange reports began coming in from the frontier worlds. Ships were disappearing near the outer colonies. The few survivors told wild stories about creatures made of shadow that seemed to hunt specifically for war beasts. Commander Veltar dismissed the reports during the evening briefing. Pirates and smugglers, he said. They spread these ghost stories to keep patrol ships away from their operations. But Jake noticed that Zara became restless after the briefing. She paced in her enclosure and made low, worried sounds. When Jake came to see her, she pressed her head against the barrier and shared images with him. Dark shapes moving between stars, the smell of something ancient and hungry. "What is it, girl?" Jake whispered, but Zara couldn't explain in words. She could only share the growing feeling that something was very wrong. The next day brought aerial combat training. Riders and war beasts had to work in teams, attacking practice targets while defending against automated defense systems. Jake watched as the other pairs followed careful formations, each rider directing their war beast through the neural interface. When Jake and Zara's turn came, Instructor Melox expected them to fail. Jake put on the interface headset as required, but as soon as the exercise began, he pulled it off. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Instructor Melox clicked angrily. Jake didn't answer. He grabbed Zara's neck spikes and held on as she launched into the air. Together, they ignored the planned attack route and followed their instincts instead. Zara seemed to know exactly where the targets would be and how the defense systems would react. Jake learned to lean with her turns, to anticipate her moves, to become part of her flight rather than trying to direct it. They completed the exercise in half the expected time, destroying all targets without taking a single hit from the defense systems. Instructor Melox was furious. "You cannot simply ignore the protocols. What if you had been hit?"
"What if you had crashed?"
"But we didn't," Jake said quietly. "We trusted each other." That night, Jake snuck out of his quarters to visit Zara. He found her standing at the edge of her enclosure, staring out at the stars through the clear barrier. Her whole body was tense, like a dog sensing a storm. "You feel it too, don't you?" Jake said. "Something's coming." Zara made a deep, rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl. Through their bond, Jake felt what she was feeling. An ancient fear. Something her species remembered even if the other races had forgotten. The next morning brought terrible news. Outpost Meridian, a research station on the frontier, had sent a distress call. The message was broken and full of static, but 3 words came through clearly: "Shadow Hunters," and "Help us." Commander Veltar immediately organized a rescue mission. He would lead a squadron of the Academy's best graduated riders to investigate. The cadets would remain at the Academy to continue their training. Jake watched the squadron depart from the observation deck. 12 fully trained riders and their war beasts led by Commander Veltar himself. They looked powerful and confident as they flew toward the frontier. For 3 days, there was no word from the rescue mission. On the 4th day, a single war beast returned. Jake was in the training yard when the alarms began sounding. He looked up to see a war beast approaching the station, flying in an unsteady, wounded pattern. As it came closer, Jake could see terrible wounds across its sides. Long, deep cuts that looked like claw marks, but bigger than any animal could make. The war beast crash-landed in the emergency bay. Jake ran toward the sound with the other cadets and instructors. What he saw made his stomach turn. The war beast was dying. Its rider was nowhere to be seen. Across its scales were burns and cuts unlike anything Jake had ever seen, as if something had tried to tear it apart with claws made of pure energy. Zara appeared beside Jake. Having broken out of her enclosure, she approached the dying war beast and touched her head to its snout. For a moment, they shared something: memories, warnings, desperate messages. Then the wounded war beast closed its eyes and stopped breathing. Zara looked up at Jake, and through their bond he felt her terror and rage. Whatever had attacked the rescue mission was still out there, and now it knew where to find the Academy. "Get to the archive computers," Instructor Melox ordered the remaining staff. "Find everything we can about shadow hunters, and prepare the station defenses. If the rescue mission failed, we may be next." Jake put his hand on Zara's neck, feeling her powerful muscles tense under his palm. Through their bond, he sensed something that scared him more than the unknown enemy. Zara wasn't just afraid. She was getting ready to fight. The Academy's archive computers worked through the night, searching for any information about shadow hunters. Jake couldn't sleep, so he spent the dark hours with Zara in the training yard. She was too agitated to rest, pacing back and forth while making low, worried sounds. By morning, Instructor Melox had found something in the old records. He called everyone to the main briefing room, his 8 arms trembling as he operated the display screens. The Shadow Hunters have another name, he announced. They're called Void Stalkers. According to these records, they nearly drove the war beasts extinct 3,000 years ago. Ancient images appeared on the screens, cave paintings and stone carvings from a dozen different worlds. They all showed the same thing: dark shapes attacking creatures that looked like war beasts. In every image, the war beasts were running or dying. The Void Stalkers exist partially outside normal space, Instructor Melox continued. They appear as living shadows, but can become solid enough to attack. They seem to feed on the life energy of war beasts specifically. Vera raised her hand. But the records say they were destroyed. How can they be back? The records say they disappeared, Instructor Melox corrected. No one ever confirmed they were truly gone. It appears they have been hiding, waiting, perhaps growing stronger. Jake felt Zara's reaction through their bond, a mixture of ancient racial memory and personal fear. Her species had never forgotten the Void Stalkers, even if everyone else had. What do we do? Asked Crix, his mandibles clicking nervously. Instructor Melox looked around the room. We wait for reinforcements and defend the academy. The main fleet has been notified, but it will take days for them to arrive. That didn't feel right to Jake. Something in Zara's emotions told him that waiting was exactly the wrong thing to do. The Void Stalkers were hunters. They would choose when and how to attack. For 2 days, the academy remained on high alert. Automated defense systems scanned space constantly. The remaining instructors organized watch schedules and emergency procedures. Everyone was nervous and afraid. On the second night, Jake was on duty in the observation deck when Zara suddenly appeared beside him. She had broken out of the beast quarters again, but this time the instructors didn't try to stop her. They had learned that she knew things they didn't. Zara pressed against the clear barrier, staring out at the star field. Her whole body was tense, like a cat watching something move in tall grass. What is it? Jake whispered. Through their bond, he felt her answer. Something was out there, moving between the shadows of space. Something that shouldn't exist, but did. Jake looked where Zara was looking, but saw only empty space and distant stars. Then just for a moment, one of the stars seemed to flicker. Not dim exactly, but change in a way that made his eyes hurt to look at. Alert, Jake called to the duty officer. Something's wrong in Sector 7. The duty officer, a young alien named Kex, checked his instruments. I see nothing unusual, but Zara's growl was getting louder. Jake trusted her senses more than any machine. Sound the alarm, Jake said. They're here. Kex hesitated, then activated the station-wide alert. Klaxons began wailing through the corridors. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Seconds later, the first Void Stalker materialized inside the station's outer ring. Jake had never seen anything like it. The creature was huge, maybe 15 feet tall, but it seemed to be made of living darkness. Its shape kept shifting like smoke trying to hold a solid form. Only its eyes were clearly visible, burning white points in the shadow. Impossible, Kex gasped. How did it get past the shields? The Void Stalker moved toward the beast quarters where the young war beasts were kept. Its form flickered between solid and shadow, making it nearly impossible to track. Zara crashed through the barrier of the observation deck, shattering the clear material like glass. She landed in the corridor below and charged toward the Void Stalker with a roar that shook the entire station. Jake didn't think. He grabbed an emergency cable and swung down after her. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the training simulations. The Void Stalker could become shadow to avoid attacks, then solidify to strike with claws that burned like acid. Zara was faster and stronger than Jake had ever seen her, but every hit she landed seemed to pass through empty darkness. Jake watched the fight and suddenly understood something. Back home, when predators threatened the cattle, his father had taught him to watch for patterns. Every animal, no matter how smart or dangerous, had habits. The Void Stalker flickered between shadow and solid form, but there was a rhythm to it. A brief moment when it had to become solid to attack. Jake began to feel that rhythm through his bond with Zara. Now, he shouted, and Zara struck just as the creature solidified. Her claws raked across the Void Stalker's side, drawing a scream that sounded like tearing metal. Dark fluid splattered the corridor walls. The creature turned toward Jake, its burning eyes full of rage. For a terrifying moment, he thought it would attack him directly. Then more alarms sounded from other parts of the station. There are more of them, Jake realized. The Void Stalker flickered and vanished, leaving behind only the smell of burned metal and something else. something ancient and hungry. Jake and Zara ran toward the beast quarters, where the sounds of battle were growing louder. They found chaos. 3 more void stalkers had appeared, and the young war beasts were crying out in terror. Several instructors were trying to fight the creatures, but their weapons seemed useless against beings that could turn to shadow. Vera and Frost were backed into a corner, ice attacks passing harmlessly through their enemy. Crix and Thunder were trying to protect 2 of the younger beasts, but the Void Stalker kept flickering between solid and shadow, striking when they couldn't defend. Jake saw the pattern again, the moment when each creature had to become solid to attack, but he couldn't shout warnings to everyone at once. Then he felt something new through his bond with Zara. She was reaching out, not just to him, but to all the war beasts in the area. Her thoughts touched Thunder, then Frost, then the younger creatures. For the first time in thousands of years, the war beasts began to fight as a pack. Thunder struck just as his enemy solidified. Frost's ice attack caught another Void Stalker in solid form, freezing it long enough for her to follow up with claws and teeth. The younger war beasts stopped crying and started coordinating their movements. But the most shocking thing was what happened to the riders. Through their bonds with the war beasts, Vera and Crix could feel the pack connection too. They began moving together, anticipating each other's actions, supporting each other without needing to speak. Jake found himself at the center of it all. Somehow, through Zara, he could sense all the war beasts and their riders. He could feel when each Void Stalker would solidify, where they would attack next, how the pack should move to counter them. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last Void Stalker vanished back into shadow, Jake collapsed against Zara's side, exhausted. "How did you do that?" Vera asked, her blue skin pale with shock. "How did we all know what to do?" Jake looked around at the war beasts and riders. They were all staring at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. Even Crix seemed impressed. "I don't know," Jake said honestly. It just felt right. Through the pack bond that was slowly fading, he felt something that scared him. The Void Stalkers weren't gone. They were regrouping, learning, preparing for a bigger attack. And somewhere in the darkness of space, something much larger and more dangerous was watching the Academy with burning white eyes. The Academy's communication systems were dead. Whatever the Void Stalkers had done during their attack had cut off all contact with the main fleet. The surviving instructors gathered in the emergency command center, trying to figure out what to do next. "We have no choice but to wait for rescue," Instructor Melox insisted. "The defense is held. If we stay inside the protected areas, we should be safe until help arrives." Jake disagreed, but he kept quiet during the meeting. Through his growing connection with the war beasts, he could feel that the Void Stalkers were still out there. They were watching, waiting, planning something bigger. After the meeting, Crix approached him in the corridor. The insectoid's attitude had completely changed since the battle. "That thing you did," Crix said, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Connecting all the war beasts and riders. I have never heard of such a thing." "I didn't mean to do it," Jake replied. "It just happened. My people have worked with war beasts for 800 years, Crix continued. "We have detailed records of their behavior and abilities. Nothing mentions this pack bonding across multiple pairs." Jake was about to respond when Vera joined them. Behind her, more cadets were gathering, not just the successful riders, but even some who had failed to bond. "We need to talk," Vera said quietly. "All of us." They met in one of the smaller training rooms away from the instructors. 12 cadets in total, representing 6 different species. Even Nolan was there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "The instructors are wrong," Vera began. "Waiting for rescue is not going to work. Those creatures are planning something." "How can you know that?" asked a cadet named Dex, whose rocky skin marked him as one of the stone people. "Because my war beast tells me," Vera said simply. "Ever since the battle, Frost has been different. More aware. She can sense things she couldn't before." Crix nodded. "Thunder is the same. It is as if the pack connection opened something in their minds." All eyes turned to Jake. He felt uncomfortable being the center of attention, but he knew they were right. "Zara's been trying to show me something," Jake admitted. "Images of the Void Stalkers gathering in the asteroid field. They're not just random hunters. They're organized and they're planning a major attack." "Then we need to do something," Nolan said. Jake was surprised to hear the older human agreeing with him. "The instructors think like military officers. Defense formations, waiting for orders. But these things aren't a normal enemy. What do you suggest? Crix asked. Jake had been thinking about this since the battle. We fight like a pack, not like individual riders following orders, but like a hunting group working together. The instructors will never approve that, Dex pointed out. Then we don't ask for approval, Vera said firmly. Over the next few hours, Jake found himself planning their defense. It felt strange to be giving orders to cadets who had more training and experience than him. But somehow it also felt natural. Through Zara, he could sense all the war beasts in the academy. The pack connection was getting stronger, allowing him to feel their locations, their emotions, even their individual strengths and abilities. He began organizing them not by rank or species, but by how they could work together. Thunder and Zara will take the lead, Jake explained, using a holographic display to show the station layout. They're the strongest and fastest. Frost and the ice types will control the corridors, slowing down any void stalkers that get inside. The younger beasts will stay in the center, but they're not just hiding, they'll be our early warning system. What about the riders? Nolan asked. We trust our war beasts, Jake said. No neural interfaces, no rigid commands. We become part of the pack and let our instincts guide us. Crix's mandibles clicked nervously. This goes against everything we have been taught. Everything we've been taught assumes we're fighting a normal enemy, Jake replied. The void stalkers exist partially outside our reality. Normal tactics won't work against them. That night, the void stalkers came in force. Jake felt them first through Zara's senses, dozens of shadow forms moving through space toward the academy. The automated defenses opened fire, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through creatures that existed between dimensions. They're coming, Jake announced over the communication system. All riders to your war beasts. Remember, trust the pack. The instructors tried to maintain control, but their careful defensive plans fell apart within minutes. The void stalkers didn't attack the way anyone expected. They appeared inside the station at random points, seeming to step out of shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide them. Jake and Zara were in the main corridor when the first wave hit. 3 void stalkers materialized around them, burning white eyes focused on Zara with hungry intensity. But this time, Jake was ready. Through the pack bond, he could feel Thunder approaching from behind, Frost moving to cut off the creature's escape route, even the younger war beasts positioning themselves to support the attack. Now, Jake whispered, and the pack struck as one. The battle flowed through the station like a deadly dance. Jake found that he could sense not just where his pack members were, but where the void stalkers would appear next. The creatures seemed to follow patterns based on shadow and fear, materializing wherever the darkness was deepest or the defenders felt most isolated. But the pack was never isolated. Even when Jake and Zara were separated from the others, he could feel their support through the bond. When Vera and Frost were cornered in the armory, Jake knew exactly where to send Crix and Thunder for a flanking attack. The most amazing thing was how the other riders adapted. Nolan, who had always been arrogant and competitive, began working seamlessly with Dex and his stone-scaled partner. Vera's tactical thinking complemented Crix's aggressive fighting style perfectly. Even the cadets who hadn't successfully bonded with war beasts found ways to help. They coordinated supplies, managed communications, and provided support that kept the pack functioning as a unit. But as the battle continued, Jake realized something disturbing. The Void Stalkers weren't really trying to win. They were testing the pack, learning how it worked, identifying its weaknesses. Through Zara's heightened senses, he felt something massive approaching the station. Something that made the other Void Stalkers seem small and weak by comparison. Fall back to the central hub, Jake ordered through the pack bond. Something bigger is coming. As if responding to his words, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The external sensors had detected something impossible, a ship-sized void moving toward them through space, visible only because it blocked out the stars behind it. Jake and the pack retreated to the Academy's central training arena, the largest open space in the station. Around them, the smaller Void Stalkers faded back into shadow, leaving the arena empty except for the pack. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, Jake heard something that chilled his blood, a voice speaking directly into his mind. "Ancient and cold and infinitely patient, little Alpha," the voice whispered. "You have shown my children something new. Now show me." The temperature in the arena dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Emergency lighting flickered on, revealing a shadow the size of a building flowing through the walls like they were made of water. The pack pressed closer together. War beasts and riders united by bonds stronger than fear. Jake felt their trust, their willingness to follow his lead even against something impossible. "Together," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the huge arena. "We fight together." The shadow began to take shape, forming into something that looked like a void stalker but was large enough to swallow a war beast whole. Its burning white eyes fixed on Jake with an intelligence that made him feel very small and very young. But he wasn't alone. Through the pack bond, Jake felt the strength and courage of every war beast and rider in the arena. Whatever happened next, they would face it as one. The massive void stalker towered over the pack, its form shifting between solid shadow and empty darkness. When it spoke, Jake felt the words inside his skull rather than hearing them with his ears. "I am the first hunter," the creature said. "For 3,000 years I have traveled the galaxy, seeking the return of the true pack leaders. Your species interests me, young Alpha." Jake's throat felt dry, but he forced himself to speak. "What do you want?" "To test you," the first hunter replied. "The war beasts once ruled the battlefield because they fought as one organism, led by alphas who understood the hunt. Then the civilized races tamed them, broke them, turned them into tools rather than partners." Around Jake, the pack tensed. Through the bond, he felt their fear but also their determination. Zara pressed against his side, her warmth steady and reassuring. "The war beasts have forgotten what they were," the first hunter continued. "But you, little human, you remember something the others have lost. You fight with instinct rather than technology. You lead through understanding rather than domination. So why are you trying to kill us?" Jake asked. The creature's laugh was like breaking glass. "I am not trying to kill you. I am trying to wake you up." The first hunter gestured with one massive claw, and images filled the air around them, holographic scenes of battles from across the galaxy. Jake saw war beasts fighting alongside various alien races, but in every image, the beasts looked diminished somehow. They followed orders instead of hunting. They waited for commands instead of trusting their instincts. "This is what your war beasts have become," the first hunter said. "Powerful weapons, yes, but no longer the apex predators they were born to be. The galaxy has forgotten what it means to face a true pack in battle." Jake began to understand. "You've been attacking them to force them to remember. To force them to evolve," the creature corrected. "The weak bonds between rider and beast, the dependence on technology, the rigid military thinking, all of this must be burned away before the true partnership can emerge." Through the pack bond, Jake felt something incredible happening. The connection that had started with just him and Zara was spreading beyond the academy. War beasts across the galaxy were awakening to the call, their dormant pack instincts stirring for the first time in centuries. "You feel it?" the first hunter observed. "The awakening spreads. Soon every war beast in the galaxy will remember what they are. But the question remains, are you strong enough to lead them?" The massive creature solidified completely, becoming a physical opponent rather than a shadow. Its claws gleamed like black metal, and its burning eyes promised a fight unlike anything Jake had experienced. "Face me, little Alpha," the first hunter commanded. "Show me if humans truly deserve to lead the pack." Jake looked around at his friends, Crix with his mandibles set in determination, Vera's blue eyes bright with courage, even Nolan nodding encouragement. The war beasts stood ready, their trust flowing through the bond like a river of strength. "This isn't just about me," Jake realized. "It's about all of us." He stepped forward, but not alone. The entire pack moved with him, riders and war beasts united in purpose. Through the bond, Jake felt their individual strengths becoming part of him. Crix's tactical thinking, Vera's ice-cold focus, Nolan's stubborn courage, Thunder's raw power, Frost's precise control. The first hunter attacked with speed that should have been impossible for something so large. But Jake didn't try to dodge as an individual. He moved as part of the pack, and the pack moved as one organism. Zara's strength became his strength. Thunder's speed became his speed. Frost's precision became his precision. When the first hunter's claws swept toward him, Jake rolled aside with fluid grace that was both human and war beast combined. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Academy's training manuals. It wasn't a contest between individual fighters, but between two different philosophies of combat. The first hunter fought with ancient power and solitary cunning. The pack fought with coordinated teamwork and shared instinct. Jake found himself moving in ways he had never trained for, responding to attacks he couldn't have anticipated alone. When the first hunter tried to separate him from the others, the pack flowed around the creature like water, always maintaining their connection. But the most incredible thing was how the bond continued to spread. Through Zara's heightened senses, Jake could feel war beasts across the galaxy responding to the call. On distant worlds, riders were experiencing the same awakening, the same shift from technological dependence to instinctual partnership. "Yes," the first hunter said as they fought. "This is what I have been seeking. Not domination, but true partnership. Not control, but understanding." The creature's attacks became less focused on destroying and more focused on testing. It wanted to see how far the pack bond could stretch, how strong the connection could become. Jake gave it everything he had. Through the bond, he reached out not just to the war beasts in the arena, but to every awakening pair across the galaxy. For one incredible moment, he felt connected to thousands of minds, human and alien and war beast, all united in the same purpose. The first hunter stopped attacking and stepped back. Around the arena, the smaller void stalkers began to fade, retreating into shadow. "Enough," the massive creature said. "You have shown me what I needed to see." Jake collapsed to his knees, exhausted by the effort of maintaining such a vast connection. Zara pressed against his side, her purr rumbling through the arena. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now the galaxy learns what war beasts truly are," the first hunter replied. "What they have always been, when led by those who understand them. The age of tamed beasts is ending. The age of true partnership begins." The creature began to fade, its solid form becoming shadow once again. "You have passed the test, little Alpha. But remember, leadership is not about power. It is about understanding. It is about trust. Will we see you again?" Jake called out. "When the pack needs testing, I will return," the first hunter said. "But I do not think that will be soon. You have learned what you needed to learn." The massive shadow vanished, taking the oppressive cold with it. The arena's normal lighting flickered back on, and Jake found himself surrounded by his friends and their war beasts. "Is it over?" Vera asked. Jake stood up slowly, feeling the pack bond settling into something permanent and wonderful. Across the galaxy, he could sense thousands of new partnerships forming, riders and war beasts discovering what they could accomplish together. "No," Jake said with a smile. "I think it's just beginning." 3 days later, the rescue fleet arrived to find the Academy intact and its cadets transformed. Commander Veltar was amazed to discover that not only had they survived the Void Stalker attack, but they had somehow triggered a galaxy-wide awakening among the War Beast Corps. Jake was offered command of the entire War Beast program, a position that would have made him one of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. He turned it down. Instead, he chose to stay at the Academy as an instructor, teaching other cadets the lessons he had learned. Not about domination or control, but about partnership and trust. About understanding that true strength came not from commanding others, but from working together as equals. Zara remained by his side, not as his mount, but as his partner and friend. Together, they trained a new generation of riders who understood that war beasts were not weapons to be wielded, but companions to be respected. The galaxy had not seen the last of the Void Stalkers. The first hunter had made that clear. But when they returned, they would find war beasts and riders who remembered what they were meant to be. Not servants and masters, but members of the same pack, united by bonds stronger than any technology. Jake often stood on the Academy's observation deck, watching new cadets train with their war beast partners. The rigid formations and neural interfaces were being replaced by natural movement and instinctual communication. The change wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. Sometimes late at night, he could feel the pack bond stretching across the galaxy, connecting him to thousands of riders and war beasts who had found their true partnership. It was a responsibility he had never asked for, but one he accepted gladly. After all, every pack needed an alpha, and sometimes the alpha was just a farm boy from Montana who understood that the best way to lead was to trust in the strength of those around him.